All right, we have reached the top of the hour and let's get started. My name's Steve Whaley. I'm with the Propane Education Research Council, and we're very grateful to our host, the Missouri Propane Education Research Council, who we'll be hearing from a little bit later towards the end of today's program. But we're very glad that you are here. Got a great lineup of folks that we're going to be speaking with. Jill up in Michigan trying to stay warm while Paul down in Florida is enjoying lotioning up the sunscreen, and then Dave Rigney as well. Steve Ahrens from Mopert will also be addressing, and Joy Johnson is she's gonna do the Jerry Maguire show me the money portion of this too. But we're gonna do a flyover real quick or not real quick, we're going to go very fast, but we're going to do a flyover of what all this is about. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with that portion of it. But today's agenda is going to be, or session is going to be recorded. So don't get too furious with your note taking. You always come back and take a peek at it. It is going to be recorded. We do have all of the participants on mute just to make sure that we can present and everybody can hear. And we're going to go in this order. The overview, yours truly will take care of. And then we're going to go all the way to Michigan to hear Jill's story of what she's doing with her paratransit organization. And then we'll go down to Florida where Paul will fill us in. And then we're going to talk about how we actually get fuel in these vehicles. And Joy and some others are going to help us talk about ways of supplementing some of the financial burden of making this happen. So with that, let me go ahead and get started, and we'll bring everybody back with their video cameras and microphones towards the Q&A portion of it. But let's go ahead and get started with this whole propane autogas for the paratransit industries session. So zooming around at that 50,000 foot level, what I'd like to do is back up just a little bit and say what constitutes a successful energy adoption. You know, we're real used to gasoline. We moved from diesel in the paratransit world, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but it's mostly gasoline now. But what makes a move in energy, and why should we do it before we tackle, what propane has to offer? So this would be for everybody. If you have an electric solution, a bio solution, a CNG solution, a propane solution, what's the criteria for making it successful of any of those energy sources? So, well, one, if it's not reducing emissions, it's never going to get any traction, okay? We are in a world now of, we're going to make our world better, cleaner, and so on. Okay, so number one, it has to be cleaner. Number two, it has to be cheaper than what we're doing. Otherwise, we will never be able to subsidize something into a sustainable existence, okay? It has to stand on its own legs, and it's got to be cheaper than what we're doing now, or you're never going to get widespread adoption. The third one is, hey, I'm not going to compromise on performance or range. It needs to step up and do that. And if it can't do that, go home, figure it out, and come back when you can. And the last one kind of goes without saying, we have to have a whole lot of this energy source domestic instead of being dependent on other sources outside of our own country. So with that kind of established, where does propane line up? Okay, so we're gonna master this this slide movement here. I know we are. It's getting there. Okay, terrific. We're going to show today how propane is the most cost-effective energy source on reducing emissions, especially the most harmful one, the nitrogen oxides. It's the lowest total cost of ownership of not of just alternative energies, but current energies as well. So we're going to demonstrate that, how it's comparable with performance, especially with the range, and how we have a lot of it. We produce in the United States more propane than any other country in the world. We used about 9 billion of the 28 billions that we generated, but we sent nearly 20 billions of it gallons of it overseas to other countries who like to use it in their transportation and other sources as well. So with that, I want to give you an idea of what's going on with one. We're up in Michigan, we're down in Florida, so I wanted to go to the other side of the country and get the perspective from MTS.
Our mission is to put service on the street every day. We're using taxpayer dollars. We certainly don't want to invest in some technology that is going to diminish our capability to put service on the street. System-wide, we carry close to 320,000 people a day. On our rubber-tired fleet, it's close to about 200,000 passengers a day. And, you know, part of our mantra is we are good for the environment, getting people out of their cars, but we've taken that a step further in trying to look at how we power our vehicles.
Leveraging propane on our paratransit vehicles gives us a whole new area that we can go, which we didn't think that we had that opportunity before. We were running a full gasoline fleet. Propane system gives us the ability to provide a vehicle that performs almost exactly like all of our other technologies. The ease of maintenance is an important piece of that, and the propane systems do not require any additional equipment or any additional kind of maintenance operation. So it's almost seamless for us.
Propane comes along, and propane adds another dimension to it because not only is it lower cost, it is cleaner burning. This is what technology should do for us. It should produce the results we want at cost savings. I think that provides an opportunity for transit systems across the country to live up to what we stand for, and that is cost-effective operations as well as helping to clean the environment.
California has always had the most stringent air quality goals. We want to reduce A, emissions that lead to poor air quality, and B, emissions that are there that drive the climate change that's going on.
We're always challenged with finding ways to reduce our emissions. When we made the presentation to switch to propane, and we talked about not only the savings on fuel costs, but also the emissions reduction. That made a very quick deliberation, and our board was fully supportive. And so the decision to go to propane was an easy one for MTS.
You know, we're going to have over 70 propane-fueled buses here, and it's going to make a big difference. It's going to make a difference in air quality and greenhouse gas, and it's going to make a difference at the bottom line as an operator. It's going to save us money. When you can do something that helps you to make positive changes for the environment and saves you money, that's a good day, and that's something you ought to jump on.
Well, Julian, I'm going to interrupt just for a second. I have been getting some messages that they're unable to join our session today because it's reached capacity, and I'm glad it's really popular. But if there's a way we might be able to add some more folks in, that'd be awesome. Okay. With that,
Okay.
what is this propane that we're talking about? A lot of times we call it auto gas when we're using it in a motor vehicle that's going down the road, but it is exactly the same fuel that so many people have out on their back deck when they're cooking with their grill. But it goes into households all over these United States, in agriculture, forklifts, and warehouse. Even long before the EPA was measuring emissions, we knew propane was so much cleaner than gasoline and diesel because people didn't die inside the warehouses when we had forklifts operating on propane. But we're also doing it to clean up the environment with off-road vehicles and especially commercial mowers. But it's the exact same fuel that we're talking about when we say auto gas. And it has two different sources. We have an organic source where most of it comes from, but then we also have a renewable source that I'll talk about a little bit at the end. And like I said, we have a ton of it. These are the reasons why people are moving towards it. And we're going to go through this, and I'm going to let you listen exactly to more of your peers from their perspective. And I think that'll have a great impact. But everybody has a path to zero emissions. And no one can actually achieve zero emissions because there's emissions from brake pads, there's emissions from tires, there's emission, all of the wear, the particulate matter, everything has some emissions. Some of it has it right at the tailpipe. Some of it has it where the power is being generated and then transferred through electrical lines. But everybody is striving to get there as close as possible to zero. And propane is doing the exact same thing. Here's how we're lining up. Because we don't have the particulate matter in our fuel to begin with, we're virtually zero there. But we've made huge strides with nitrogen oxides, especially when we're talking about school buses. It's 96% NOx reductions in that environment with our 0.02 and even now 0.01 duty cycles. And greenhouse gases is the one we're working on mostly now. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end and how we compare to what most people believe being the cleanest in the electric environment. Now, David Rigney is going to talk about fuel and infrastructure, but I did want to just mention nationally, propane auto gas has always been cheaper than gasoline and diesel. Depending on where you're at in the country. I know this is a snapshot from back in September, but these are some of the auto gas prices that were produced that week. David will talk a little bit more about the infrastructure, fueling contracts and things like that, and how you can get really competitive with that price. Propane is not just for paratransit. We have a lot of vehicles that are out there. Probably the most popular one would be in the school bus arena. All three major manufacturers of school bus have propane in their options. We have 21,000 of those vehicles operating now, moving over 1 million kids. But what I think is astounding is that there are 1,000 different school districts and contractors that have adopted propane. And once they start adopting, then they want to fill their whole fleet with it. And a lot of the reason is because of the cost, the capital cost of the vehicle, like we're talking about here, but also the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of the energy, and the cost of actually keeping it going. Just to give you an idea, this is a exact same school bus equipped with diesel, with propane, with CNG, and also with electric. And you can see you can do a whole lot more with propane, like almost 4 times more vehicles than you can with the money you spend on doing an electric version. We have lots of manufacturers out there that can do this. Roush is one of those, and they have not just the school buses, but also large trucks and the chassis. Look at that, E350, 450 for a lot of the cutaway versions that you'll be working with as well. Alliance Auto Gas, and I'm real sorry that our Net Transit person was not able to join us. She's a big proponent of the Alliance Auto Gas aftermarket, converting a gasoline vehicle to operate on propane. And you can see that they had their ribbon cutting here just not long ago with their 3rd station. ICOM is another one that provides a solution aftermarket for existing gasoline vehicles to be converted to run on propane. But the paratransit industry is perfect for our sweet spot. I think electric does great in passenger vehicles where we have a really low weight ratio and the range that's needed. But as you climb into higher weight classes, the dynamics change, and it's a really sweet spot for propane. We handle that class 3 through 7 better than any other fuel. And with the amount of consumption that goes into most of these paratransit vehicles that you have, since we're saving you money on a cost per gallon of fuel and a cost per mile, that's where the real savings come in, and we'll hear more about that. This is just a snapshot of where MTS in that video we were talking about. They have over 100 of their vehicles now operating on propane auto gas. The infrastructure part, David's going to cover. I just wanted to say one thing about the dispensing nozzles. Very scalable. You can get one that just counts the number of gallons that are being dispensed, or you can have fuel management integration, or you can go all the way down to the retail level, like you see in the convenience store here, where you can get propane right at the bottom of the exit ramp. One thing I do want to note is there has been a regulation change this year, and everything that's coming out now has what's called the quick connect nozzle, where you just press it on, squeeze it, no gloves, no eyewear, no PPE that's needed to do all the refueling. And all the drivers love this because it makes it very, very easy. But on that infrastructure cost, it's substantially less than any of the other infrastructure out there. And if you do go outside of the range that you're going to have infrastructure set up at your place, the DOE has great alt fuel station locators to find where you can get it. So where's propane going in the future? We have lots of things that are changing. And 10 years ago, not many people were thinking about carbon reduction goals, but now we have more than 50% of the country's population very interested and legislating carbon reduction goals in their individual states. So renewable propane is something that we are been introducing. It's nowhere near the volume that we have with the organic propane that we have. But it is something that is being developed, and the two main sources now are REG, and we have some in Southern California. But let's do a quick comparison, because a lot of people think if I have a zero quote emission vehicle like with an EV, that I'm going to be the cleanest. Well, that energy has to come from somewhere to generate electricity. Most of it comes from fossil fuels. We have coal, natural gas, petroleum, and biomass, and some renewable with nuclear, hydro, solar, wind, but in much smaller amounts. But do a comparison real quick. Propane, now this isn't renewable propane, this is just regular propane, in all of the 50 states has a carbon intensity defined by our government regulatories with this carbon intensity number. And you can look at Missouri there. It's below 80 in its carbon intensity. The electric grid is 267. So we have a much higher greenhouse gas going on through the electric grid than if we were to use propane. But let's measure the actual CO2 tons of one transit bus compared to another, one on EV and one on propane. And you can see in the state of Missouri, it's 391 tons of CO2 less running on propane than it would be on being charged through the electric grid. Now, if you introduce the renewable propane, best renewable propane compared to the best electric grid of the future, that's all renewable and meets everybody's goals, even with a battery that's 5 times more powerful than it is today, we're still there. And that point here is we're not just a fuel for today or a bridge fuel for tomorrow, but in the longest range goals, we are still the best for that. Now, don't take my word for it. This is recorded. You can go back to all of these sources where that data comes from. Summing it all up, 3 things. One is it's very cost effective. Propane has about a 15% vehicle cost in addition to the normal conventional style vehicle. In the electric arena, you're about 250% of that cost. So we can put a whole lot more propane vehicles on the road and actually go farther, because we're going to have a 300-mile range with most of these configurations, where the electric vehicle is going to have a maximum of 100-mile range. But if you want to turn on the heater or air conditioner, that substantially gets reduced. And I think we've covered how the greenhouse gas reductions are there. Propane.com has a wealth more information than what I've been able to cover today. But let's get to some of the really good stuff. Let's hear from Jill. Jill, if you could turn your video back on, and we're going to have Jill Drury from is it Charlevoix County? Am I pronouncing that right, Jill?
It is Charlevoix County.
Charlevoix County. Okay, I was wanting to do that so well but Jill's got I won't go into how many years experience that she has, but she has a lot, and also not just with the transportation, but in the county commission as well. So she has a wealth of knowledge, not just from the operational standpoint, but from even a much bigger perspective of doing this in the context of running their county. But Jill, go ahead and fill us in on a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and why you did it, and why did propane fit into this?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so thank you. The introduction. I have a lot of years of county government under my belt, more than I want to admit. I started out in West Michigan and ran a small transit program down there in the Commission on Aging, and then moved here to Charlevoix County about 9 years ago, which is a public transit program. When I came on board up here, we had a mixture of vehicles, medium duties and cutaways, and they were both gas and diesel. We had one of the alternative battery operated buses that was just a nightmare. And we knew that going down the road that we were going to want to look at doing something different with our fleet. I jumped in right away when we were replacing vehicles and said enough of those diesel medium duties. We really don't need the big buses, and we don't need the diesel vehicle. So we moved to primarily gas for a couple of years, and then Flint Mass Transit, which is down in the eastern part of our state, started a propane fleet program, and they were working with Roush Cleantech. And so I was watching what Flint was doing, and paying quite a bit of attention to the data that they were presenting at the rural transit manager meetings and our annual meetings here in our state. Not only was Flint there presenting information, Roush was there presenting information, and it was interesting to me to see the savings that Flint was seeing in their big system that they had, and the numbers of vehicles that they were purchasing with propane versus a gas or a diesel vehicle, made me know that it was going to be a area that I wanted to look at. That if somebody like Flint or one of the other large systems was looking at going that direction, and that they were realizing savings, that we could potentially, even as a smaller rural transit, potentially save as well. So we have in our fleet right now 17 active vehicles. Oops, sorry. Back when we started with looking at the propane, we were in the neighborhood of about 20 vehicles. 2 of them over on Beaver Island, which is an island out in Lake Michigan, about 30 nautical miles from the shore of the city of Charlevoix. We run 2 vehicles over on that island. And so we were looking at what we might be able to do to be better partners in our community. We're a very tourist laden area. We have several large lakes. We're on the shore of Lake Michigan. We have a ski resort in our area. And so just a ton of second homes. And so we have a residential area that explodes in our summer months. And so the thought of being able to purchase vehicles that were going to be friendlier to our environment was very appealing to me. So as we watched what Flint was doing over the first year or 2 of their program, we started talking internally about when we had the opportunity to replace vehicles, that maybe doing a vehicle with propane would be a good demonstration project for us, to see how it goes. We knew that we didn't want to do another vehicle that had the batteries at that time. It just wasn't something that worked well in our situation. So it took some doing for us to work through all of the information with our board here at Transit. I had 2 board members who were fairly opposed at the time. But with the right information at hand from Roush and from Flint and other sources, it was actually very easy for me to be able to make my case for trying 1 or 2 vehicles and putting those in our fleet and going from there and seeing how things would work. So our first vehicles came to us in 2016. We put 2 into our fleet. And over the past few years, our fleet of propane powered vehicles has gone from that 2 in 2016 up to 13 buses now that are propane. We were at 14. I had 1 vehicle in an accident, so we're waiting to replace that vehicle. But right now, 76.5% of our fleet is alternative fuel. And that number is going to grow. The 3 vehicles that we have ordered right now that will be coming in March are all dual fuel, with a company that I'm sorry, I don't remember the name. Blossman is the company that's providing that conversion. And then we have 1 more propane bus that is ordered that I expect probably by the end of the fiscal year. So we've really made an investment into to the propane fleet. It's working very well for us. At first we had some of the drivers were a little fearful of the fueling. They were afraid that there would be odor. And so prior to even ordering those buses, Roush brought up a vehicle for us. Randy brought up a vehicle and let us test drive it. Let us put the drivers into that bus, let them drive it around, so that they were comfortable with what we were looking at and what we saw as the future of the vehicles for our fleet. Why switch? And you'll hear more about the numbers end of it later in the presentation. But for us, environmentally, that was one of the big reasons for us to switch. Being in this tourist area, anything that we can do to be a good partner to our communities is definitely good public relations and good for us. So, and it's good for our communities. We're seeing cost savings, obviously. The propane has been less than the cost of gasoline. That continues to be the case. And so we've been able to realize some significant savings since 2016, especially as our fleet has grown, switching to more propane versus gas. Our maintenance costs are reduced some, but bigger, we're seeing the wear and tear is a lot less. So we're not seeing as much maintenance needing to be done on those vehicles beyond the PMIs and the normal maintenance that would be done on our maintenance schedules. We're not seeing a lot of breakdowns and a lot of issues. The oldest vehicle that we have in our fleet, which we received in 2016, right now has about 174,000 miles on it. And the mechanic said that he really believes that with the propane, that is going to create a longevity for our vehicles, and that they will outlast vehicles comparative that would have been gas operated, and we'll be able to hold on to these vehicles longer. Just for a little bit of numbers for you, in 2019, we had 13 of our vehicles were operating on propane, 7 were on gas. And the numbers sort of explain themselves there, based on the gallons of propane and gas that were used. Our gas provider called us one day and said, "Hey, what's going on? You're not using much gasoline anymore." And we said, "Yeah, we've moved everything as much as we can over to propane." You'll note at the bottom of the slide that I noted our alternative fuel credit that had been extended. And so we did apply for fiscal 18 and 19 for that credit. And our credit is going to be $38,000 or is $38,000 this year, or for those last 2 years. So, and we're putting together our numbers now to submit for fiscal 20. During fiscal 20, of course, we all saw a lot of changes due to the pandemic. Our miles driven were significantly less than years past. Our passengers were a lot less. However, we still are seeing a savings, based on the amount of gas that we're purchasing versus the propane and the costs. So we feel like that propane will continue to be our fuel of choice over the coming years. Back to that first screen on the overview of our vehicles, every vehicle that we're ordering now is either a full propane system or a dual fuel system. And probably the only reason that I look at dual fuel at this point is with the Ford Transit. Having that available, because we do want to use some Ford Transits in our system. And the other reason is out on Beaver Island, it's just so costly for any fuel that we want to maintain the ability to do either the propane or the gas over on Beaver Island. For us, like I said, we've got vehicles ordered. We had 3 vehicles ordered during fiscal 20 for vans. We just ordered 1 more vehicle in the last month. We've got that cutaway bus that will be coming sometime late spring or early summer. All of these vehicles that are ordered are propane powered. One of the things that we're working on now is some improvements to our fueling station, and our fueling provider is AmeriGas. They've been just wonderful to work with. Both Roush and AmeriGas have been just fabulous partners for us. And I can't say enough about what they've done to help us with our fleet fueling program. When we started out, we had a small tank, and AmeriGas would come in whenever they needed to help fuel us. The first 2 vehicles we had were smaller tanks on those fuel tanks. And the drivers would sometimes misjudge how much fuel they had and if they were going to be able to make it back to the office. Drivers are drivers, and sometimes they don't pay attention. AmeriGas was great about rescuing us a couple times and actually meeting a bus out on the road. In 2019, we upgraded our fueling station from just a manual fuel recording. Every day our drivers just had to record pencil and paper what their fuel was and the number of gallons and their mileage. And we went to a fully functional fuel management system with the help of AmeriGas. So that's been a nice addition to our fueling station and to our infrastructure. Our next project is to put a canopy over that fueling station and area, so to help protect the drivers from the elements a little bit more, and help protect our equipment from the elements as well. One of the last things that we're going to be looking at doing, hopefully in the next year, is oil sampling. The mechanic here has noted that the oil is significantly cleaner. He does notice that. But we would like to start doing some oil sampling so that we can potentially make a case with MDOT on our service plans for our vehicles to be able to push out our our PMIs for our oil changes and such a little bit longer based on that oil sampling and such. And just a little graphic of some of our partners. We purchased from Hoekstra Transportation in Grand Rapids. They've been great to help us do what we need to do to purchase vehicles and also get those conversions done on all the vehicles. Roush Clean Tech, again, I can't say enough about what they've done for us since 2016. They're just a great partner. Tech support is super easy to work with. Our state does a training every year for our frontline folks. And Roush has sent out tech support to do presentations and sessions for that, as well as at the maintenance seminar every year. They provide tech support and information at that. So it's been, they've been just a great partner here in Michigan. MDOT, of course, can't thank them enough for all of the help that they provide our transit agencies in being able to do purchasing. We're fortunate that they do the contracts and all of the specs for all of the vehicles so that we don't have to locally spec out a vehicle and do all of that purchasing on our own. And again, a shout out to AmeriGas for all of their help. They've been just a great local partner and also great regionally and nationally. They're just a good organization to work with. So we're very fortunate to have these great partners, and they help us do the things that we need to do to serve our communities. And so I'm real thankful that we've been able to work with all of these organizations to be able to provide a cleaner fuel for all of our vehicles and a better opportunity to help our communities with making our environment better here in northern Michigan.
Terrific. Jill, thank you so much. Full disclosure, I've been able to do some other programs with Jill, but I learned a ton more in this one, and I appreciate the story that you have in getting to where you are today and who's helped you. I do have some questions for you, but I'm going to bite my tongue because we're going to do the questions at the end. And I forgot to tell everyone, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button that you can hit. And as your questions come up, please type them in there so that we can get them answered for you. And we'll do that. I'll have some questions for you, Jill. But let's go ahead and go over to Paul Strobles. We're going to go from Michigan down to sunny Florida, and we showed you a little bit about MTS out in San Diego. Right around that 100 vehicle fleet, and Jill had just about 17 on propane. Paul's got a few of these on propane, and I'll let you. I'll let Paul tell you a little bit more about his journey. And I think you have controls sent over to you to advance the slides, Paul. So yep. We'll go ahead and let you click on that screen and then use your arrow keys to advance the slides to get to some of your pictures. And we'll move on from there. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today and tell us your story.
All right. Well, thank you. I've got control, but it does not appear that it wants to advance after testing.
There is a little bit of a delay. So after left clicking on that, on the middle of that slide, and then using your arrows, it's usually 5 or 6 seconds that we have to endure.
There we go. All right, and we're there. I got it now.
Thanks, Paul.
All right. So thank you for the invitation. For those here, my name is Paul Strobles. I'm the director of paratransit in Broward County, Florida. For those that don't know where Broward County is, it's the Fort Lauderdale area. We are a 471 square mile urban area between Miami and West Palm Beach. We've got a little over 1.9 million residents in our county. And, because of our beaches, we also host about 12 million visitors annually in our area. My paratransit operations provides about 900,000 annual trips to our area. And we travel about 11.5 million miles a year within my fleet. I've been doing paratransit operations now for almost 21 years. My first 10 were in Boston, Massachusetts for the MBTA. And then I had enough of the snow and decided to relocate to South Florida and start up a program down here that had been having issues with contracted service, quality of service. And one of the first things that I wanted to do was to start to bring some of the key architecture and assets under county control and not just rely on local contractors. And so one of the major things that I wanted to implement was an alternative fuel fleet. And listening to Jill and her story, it's comforting to hear that a lot of the same sources that she had were the driving educational portions for me to sell to my commission in chain of command the need to move to a clean energy vehicle. So the folks in Flint were instrumental as well for me in Broward. The folks at Roush, AmeriGas, same folks. I was able to ask questions and learn. And so, talking about the factors that you'd want to consider bringing this in, the same thing. What do you need to consider to adopt an alternative fuel fleet in your operations? What type of vehicle are you going to use? We've seen some examples in the previous presentations. I'm going to show you what I've got in my fleet. You're going to need to manage fears and misconceptions about propane. I almost got laughed at of why the stuff that, cooks hamburgers is going to fuel my fleet. So you got to have facts and be ready to answer those questions. And, the folks at PERC are great. Their propane.com website provides so much information, stats, stories. There's a wealth of information there. And alternatively, the Department of Energy's Alternative Fuel Data Center is another resource that you can go to beyond AmeriGas or Suburban or Alliance or any of those other providers. There's so many stats to show the benefits of this fuel in comparison to the other alternatives to help you. Fueling infrastructure. David will get into it later on with AmeriGas, but when you compare the types of infrastructure you need, this is the most cost-effective alternative fuel system that you can have. And it's so mobile. It's wonderful. The other thing that I love telling the story of for people here in Broward County, South Florida, we are subject to hurricane season every year. And like any storm season, people go crazy when, there's an impending storm. They run to the stores, they clean out the shelves. Well, the other thing that happens here is you can't find gasoline anywhere. Lines of cars fuel up their vehicle. And my primary responsibility is to evacuate our paratransit customers, our disadvantaged customers to safety during those hurricane seasons. And I had to ground my vehicles that had gasoline because I couldn't put gasoline in them. And my partnership with AmeriGas, I was able to operate exclusively on propane for days due to the supply that they had as my vendor during that season. So that was a huge benefit to my operation. Benefits to the environment. We've talked about it. Broward County, my Board of County Commissioners' main goal is to keep our beaches beautiful so that everybody in the country wants to come down and visit us. We have plenty of initiatives in place to support resilient fuel options. And so this, when I brought this to them, was well received. Budget impact, knowing that everybody's got budget crisis in paratransit operations as the most expensive per passenger service. Anything that we can do to offset that that cost is a huge benefit. And I'm going to show you some of the impacts that this has had on my operation. So I wanted to share with you the various vehicles that are in my fleet that we operate for. When we went all in, we went 100%. My first vehicle purchase in 2014 was 138 chassis from Champion Bus, top left-hand corner. Those came equipped with the Roush Clean Tech system in it. They had at the time a 41 usable gallon tank, and we were 100% propane. And to do that, we simultaneously partnered with AmeriGas to provide the fuel, and worked with our vendor who operates these vehicles for me to allow that fueling station to be at their garage for pullouts every single day. But as we've grown, and over the last 5 years, I've had double-digit ridership growth in my program until the pandemic hit. We needed to add to the fleet, and this is a big vehicle, an E450, V10 engine, seats 10 passengers, 3 wheelchairs. But for me, having the right tool for the job, when you're only averaging a couple of passengers per vehicle hour on the road, I wanted to reduce the size of the vehicles that I need in my program. And, unfortunately, Roush, they concentrate on these larger size vehicles. So I had to look elsewhere for a propane system that can fit smaller size vehicles. So we introduced Ford Tauruses, and I partnered with ICOM North America to do an aftermarket bi-fuel conversion with those vehicles. The Ford Transits in the bottom left-hand corner, we've partnered with ICOM for a system with those vehicles as well, which seat 6 to 8 passengers. And then we have a fleet of MV1s, and those are my only vehicles that still run on gasoline. And we could have converted them, but the return on investment for me wasn't there to invest because they were already a few years old by the time we decided to do that. So as those start to retire out, we're replacing those with propane. So my current fleet is 377 vehicles, and today 277 of them are running on propane. So, we got the permission to move forward, and I sold it on all the benefits of going to propane, but I still had to deal with those fears and misconceptions. And so again, I bought those 138 buses in 2014, and as we started to roll them out, the first day of service was going to be January 1st, 2015. And I had to tell the drivers, the mechanics, the riders of my program, propane's unsafe, and we're telling them, no, it's very safe. Well, this happened 15 days before go live with my new vehicle fleet. I have a massive vehicle fire, and it was ground the fleet. This idiot from Boston, sold us on these propane vehicles. They're not safe. And I said, whoa, hold on. So again, AmeriGas was there, Roush was there. My Department of Transportation brought in a forensic fire expert. This was an electrical fire under the hood, clearly identified by the investigation. And I can tell you, I've personally got underneath this bus. The Roush system still had 3/4 of a tank of propane in it after this fire. The system did exactly what it was supposed to do. All of the safety valves, the tank quality on these vehicles are higher than a gasoline tank. And so, showing them that this had nothing to do with the propane system was very important for me. So, we having those facts is very, very important. Oh, one too far. The folks at PERC, the folks at AmeriGas can tell you the ignition points are higher than gasoline. They are odored so that that if there was to be a leak in your system, the manufacturing standards are ridiculous compared to the plastic tank you could get for a gasoline tank. So the quality of these systems is so high. It's evident when you have a situation like I had at the beginning of rollout with the fire. Talked about fueling infrastructure. This is an example of one of mine. It's very portable, very low cost. And whether you want to go with a capital outlay to put this in or partner with your fuel provider, they'll put this system in and lease it to you as part of the per gallon cost of your fueling contract. So there's a lot of benefits to that versus other fuels like compressed natural gas, where you've got to lay out millions of dollars for a fueling station. This is in the tens of thousands of dollars, and it's portable. My contractors change every couple of years, and so I can partner with AmeriGas to go in with a truck, pick this up, and put it at another site if needed. That's a lot more difficult with some of the other fueling options, and it's mobile. As Joe mentioned, if you've got a driver who doesn't pay attention to the gauge and runs out of fuel, there's mobile solutions to go out and fuel these vehicles up on the fly, whether with it, AmeriGas with a bobtail, or I've even got my own service trucks that have small propane tanks on to be able to fuel the vehicles up out in service. The one thing that I also would talk to you about is your range. As you invest, if you're going to put a fueling station in your garage and you've got that 300-mile range on a vehicle, it's the chicken before the egg. Do you want to put stations in your community and then invest in the vehicles, or get the vehicles and then invest in fueling stations? I did the latter. We put tanks at our garages and started to grow the fleet. And now a couple of years later, we're working to add fueling stations. In my partnership with AmeriGas, we're adding 3 stations this year that are going to assist in the overall coverage of my community. And again, those are being included in my per gallon contract with AmeriGas. So I'm not having to lay out any capital expenses for those stations. Benefits for the environment, and I'll leave it to the experts on that. But again, you can see the difference, and we are very keen on having these clean energy sources in South Florida. Our ecosystem with the coral reefs off the coast, our Everglades that are on the west side of my county are endangered. Sea level rising, all the things that you hear about in the news affects us more here on the coast. And so anything that we can do to benefit that is a #1 goal for my commission. And so, they're looking to invest in these eco-friendly processes. We've got policies in place to support, whether it's solar power, electrification of fleet vehicles, and propane are huge. So, when you partner with these vendors, they can show you the impact that these systems will have on your system. This is an emissions calculator that Roush puts out. You can plug in the vehicle that you have. And I use this when I converted to the fleet with my commission to show that over a useful life of 250,000 miles, about 5 years of life for my E450 purchase, showed a 133,000 reduction in CO2, pounds of CO2 in our air for each bus. So, I extracted that information over 5 years, and for the 138 buses that I operated, we reduced our carbon footprint by some 18 million pounds of CO2. That doesn't even include the other vehicles that I've converted with ICOM. When I calculate that into my fleet as well, over the 5-year useful life of my fleet, it jumps to 26.4 million pounds of CO2. So we've made a significant impact in our environment here in South Florida. So that's nice. But for me, I'm the one that's getting beat up every budget season, and I'm sure paratransit systems around the country deal with this. So I wanted to show the real impact of what propane's done for me over the last 5 years. Again, we went into service January 1st, 2015, and it was, immediate. We're going to jump into it. So over the last 5 years, I've consumed 7.2 million gallons of propane with AmeriGas at an average per gallon cost of $1.27. That's $9.1 million in operating expenses for the system. Using GasBuddy to take the average per gallon cost for gasoline in my region, the equivalent when taking into account the slight efficiency loss in fuel because of the higher octane, we estimate we save $5.26 million over those 5 years if these were to operate on gasoline. Jill mentioned her alternative fuel credit, which has been in place for the last 5 years. It's been authorized for fiscal year 20, and I'm hearing 21 is going to be approved as well. We've already collected $2.9 million back in this tax credit, netting my per gallon cost over the last 5 years to 86 cents per gallon of propane to operate my fleet. That's an $8.2 million savings compared to gasoline because there are no alt fuel credits for the gasoline industry. This chart not take into account this 2020, which we just submitted our credit forms for, which is an additional $254,000 in credits. Another thing that this does not capture is the state of Florida actually had a state grant that paid me back 50% of the upfit cost to buy a vehicle with a propane system compared to gasoline. And so we were able to actually recoup $1 million in vehicle cost for those upfits. So I'm sure you probably have local and state rebate programs. If you don't, PERC, their website generally lists any other incentive and grant programs that are available state to state. And I continue to lobby my legislature to make these available to help not only public agencies like myself, but private agencies can benefit from these lower cost incentive programs. So, we've definitely seen an impact. We will be 100% propane by this time next year. And we've started even to extend it into other programs that my transit agency runs beyond the paratransit. We have a city shuttle bus program that operates larger intercity buses, and those are starting to roll out on propane. So good things down here for propane. I know AmeriGas loves me. Roush and ICOM are also always looking to come down and visit. So, but if I can answer any questions to anybody on the presentation, I'd be happy to. And I think that's it for me.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the first thing that comes to my mind is your bonus compensation structure is based on those kind of savings, right? So we're
I have tried that my raises should be tied into these types of savings. It has not yet been successful.
Okay. Well, we're still looking very good. Thanks a whole lot, Paul. Hey, we're going to switch over to Dave Rigney from AmeriGas. We've heard AmeriGas's name come up quite a bit. They are a significant, actually the largest propane marketer in these United States, but we have about 3,000 of them around these United States, and they're not the only ones, but David is in a really good position because I've known him forever, and he set up a tremendous amount of infrastructure for auto gas, and I love working with Mr. Rigney, but he's actually going to be a little more generic in what you consider with setting up infrastructure, how to go about doing it. There's both Paul and, well, not Paul, but Jill, when she was just starting, kind of putting a toe in the water, she just had 1 or 2 vehicles. Now Paul jumped in, 100 and some vehicles, gets you infrastructure, right away. But even when you're just testing out a vehicle on a trial basis or a pilot program, it might be difficult to think that, well, how am I going to get fuel for these things? And David could talk about those programs as well as longer term contract too. So Mr. Rigney, would you take it over from here, please? And then we'll circle back with you on the Q&A part too.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. What I think the main thing after 10 years of doing auto gas is the bottom line is the transition. The things that I hear most common seems to be, how do we get this transition to be as seamless as possible? And the quickest answer to that is to ensure that you get with the appropriate partner that's going to make that transition easier. So as we look at, I just want to take a quick look at overview. And AmeriGas has over 6,000 employees. We do service all 50 states with 1,800 locations and have over 1.5 million customers throughout the United States. So AmeriGas is basically a supply and wholesale company that provides propane to customers, anything from gas bottle grills that you see on the back patio to different storage capacities, running kitchens and heating and cooking, and as well now into this auto gas. And we've been doing this for about 10 years. Once that propane is refined, we have locations throughout the United States that we utilize, and the way we get that to our customers is through 3 modes of transportation, either rail, either transport, which is basically the semi, and then pipeline. And then AmeriGas owns its own transportation company, which we're able to supply a lot of propane in adverse challenges, whether it's weather or other obstacles that may happen out there. So choosing the correct partner is very important. AmeriGas does have over 30 million gallons of storage, and we just transport, meaning semis, over 130,000 deliveries annually. A little bit about AmeriGas as far as the financials. You can see there again, 1.5 million customers in all 50 states. So the key to this is basically, when you're looking at moving to an alternative fuel, in this case being propane, how do we fit the pieces? And that's kind of why I chose this particular slide is, most of the puzzles there, either an OEM or an aftermarket infrastructure as far as the your vehicles are concerned are there. You have PERC support, you have your local clean city support, but now you have all those decisions, and Paul and Jill have given us examples of how they went about that whole process. But now importantly is, now what do we do? Where do we get this propane? And that's where LP providers such as AmeriGas come to play and can help in that process. And again, providing that you get with the right partner, you need to ensure that you have the right equipment. And to help me kind of discuss that is Kevin, which is our local territory sales rep in around the Missouri area. And Kevin, if you would please give us a little bit of overview of how AmeriGas can help fit these pieces together as far as the infrastructure.
Sure, no problem, David. That's basically where the fun starts. This is where you get to meet with the customer and find out the facts of how many vehicles do you have, how much room do you have to install our infrastructure, and then does it match up to what the state of Missouri codes are? So you'll see these large 18,000 gallon tanks staggered throughout different locations, but do you really need that much? And again, it's just, you're looking at all the facts. What's the number of vehicles you're running? And there's some information there on the bottom. You can start as small as, and I think Jill may have started this way, was 1,000 gallon dispenser. And you're looking at approximately, say, 20 feet by, 8 feet once you count the crash protection. So again, it's just, you're not going to be taking up a lot of space if you can sit down with your supplier and find out the space you have, the number of vehicles, number of gallons, and how often you'd like to have a delivery. So that will also save you tons of money in the infrastructure. Once you grow out of a 1,000 gallon tank, you could look at manifolding a second 1,000 or going to a 1,900 gallon tank. Again, you're just adding another tank, a little more room to the left or right of your tank and you're using the same dispensing equipment. So I think that's the biggest factor that we find when we're talking to our customers is it's going to cost a lot to get started. I don't have all this room. I mean, basically the rep that you're going to be dealing with will come in property, get the drawing submitted to the state of Missouri. We deal with the state of Missouri 3 inspectors weekly. We know what they're looking for, and we can get that permit taken care of. And then the state of Missouri rep will come to your location, approve it or not approve it, and look at different locations. But we're basically, with our knowledge, most of the time we're on the same page. I just had one this morning while I'm here in Springfield, Missouri. So again, it's communication and knowledge is what you're looking at. And then if you do have a large fleet, as David was mentioning, you know, you might look at a larger tank, a 1990, a 12,000, an 18,000. Again, it's just matching up your needs with your fleet. That's the biggest part of what you're dealing with. The equipment is the equipment, the dispenser equipment, we can tailor it to what your needs are. If you want all the information, the bells and whistles, what each vehicle is using, that's another factor we can put in. But again, it's just matching your needs with the space that you have and the budget you're working with, and we'll tailor that program with you. That's about it, David.
All right, thanks, Kevin. And again, you know, when you're looking at these different size storage vessels, you know, like Kevin said, you can go from 1,000 all the way up to 30,000. More importantly, as we put these pieces together, you, the customer, do not have to be concerned about some of those things that once we decide what size tank and what do we do next, that's where your LP provider can come in. We'll do all the drawings, the permits, all the electrical drawings, everything is necessary that basically you tell us where you want this equipment. And then 2 weeks later, you walk out and you have a full installation with everything approved. Again, we'll pull the PE stamps, drawings, appraisals, site surveys, all the things that would be necessary to have the fire marshal come in from a local standpoint to make sure we meet the codes and standards for that particular area. And then, you know, we do have the NFPA 58 and guidelines that we have to go through as far as distances and class 1, div 1, all those things, all those questions are going to be answered by your LP supplier or their subcontractor. So here summarizes, you know, propane auto gas is an opportunity for you to be very flexible. It could be stationary, it can be installed, and then as you grow or as you may have additional sites that are required, these tanks and dispensers can be moved accordingly. So we hope that we've answered your questions. Again, we'll hold off until the end. If you have additional questions, we'll be glad to address those. And Steve, thank you for the opportunity to share about the auto gas infrastructures.
No, I appreciate you and Kevin both, and I do have some questions for you, but I'm gonna wait until we're gonna talk with Joy about the show me the money part of this thing. I know the FDA has, you know, there are different packages, especially if you're in rural or more urban. But Joy, tell us a little bit about Joy Johnson. I'm sorry, with the Department of is it? I'm sorry, Joy. It is the Department of Natural Resources,
yes,
isn't it?
yes.
Okay, terrific. For the state of Missouri, and we're going to hand over the controls to you, Joy, so that you can do a left click in the middle of that slide, and then use your arrow keys to advance it a little bit more. But let us know a little bit about what's going on. I know the Volkswagen trust agreement is a lot of the NOx reduction, especially moving from diesel to an alternative. But there's other things going on as well. What can we do for paratransit in Missouri and I've noticed we have paratransits from surrounding states around Missouri too. But I know you're going to be able to talk about what's going on in the state of Missouri. So let us know what's happening there, Joy.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Yes, my name is Joy Johnson, an environmental scientist with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. And since I am from Missouri, the show me state, I will show you how you can apply for funding from the Missouri's Volkswagen Trust funds. As an overview, allegedly, Volkswagen sold diesel vehicles in the United States containing certain computer algorithms and calibrations that cause the emissions control system of those vehicles to perform differently during emissions testing. And during normal vehicle use, those cars emitted levels of NOx or nitrogen oxide significantly above the EPA compliant level. And Missouri received more than $41 million for Missouri-specific projects to reduce NOx from heavy-duty diesel sources. And as a beneficiary, the state of Missouri must submit a beneficiary mitigation plan, or BMP, to the trustee outlining the overall goals for the funds, selected eligible mitigation actions to achieve those goals, the percentage of the funds, and expected air quality benefits of the eligible mitigation actions. And you can find the Missouri BMP on the Air Program's website. The BMP's primary goal is the reduction of nitrogen oxide emissions from mobile sources by replacing aging school bus fleets, upgrading government and private fleets, reducing the consumption of diesel, promoting electric vehicles, and targeting areas that have not met air quality goals, including affected areas with affected Volkswagen vehicles. The minimum expected lifetime NOx emission reductions from Volkswagen Trust in Missouri is 1,200 tons, and the maximum is 2,000 tons. So from the over 500 projects that the department has awarded since 2019, roughly 1,800 tons of NOx emissions reduced, which means that the program has already achieved its overall emission reduction goals. So the amount of NOx reduced is a significant win for Missouri's air quality. And as you can see from the chart, the categories that received the most applications were the school buses, government trucks, DERA or Diesel Emission Reduction Act, private or non-government trucks. And we received very few applications from the transit and shuttle bus category, locomotive and marine, and airport and cargo equipment. So just from the non-government trucks and the locomotive marine categories, the program has met its overall emission reduction goals. This table here shows the different award category, their initial funding level, and the currently projected remaining funding by the end of fiscal year 2021. If you look at the transit, shuttle, and buses category, it has a projected remaining funding of $2.15 million. However, the funding levels in this table may change based on the input received on the potential updates to the BMP. If you guys are interested, you may watch a recorded webinar on BMP updates posted on the program's page. So these are the different eligible mitigation actions, and only the first 6 categories may use alternative fuels such as propane. In the next few slides, I'll talk more about the DERA category and the transit bus, shuttle bus category, as this category is closely applied to transit fleets. So what is the application process? It's actually very simple. First, you need to visit the Volkswagen Trust page on the main page of the department's website, dnr.mo.gov. And when you're there, click on the multicolored envelope to sign up for program updates. To learn more about the different categories, just click on the category box. It is very important that you download and read the program requirements and the implementation guidelines for the category that you intend to apply. When a category's application period is open, you will be able to download an application. And just an FYI, there's DERA's application period is open. However, it will close tomorrow on January 15th at 5 p.m. So when you have your Form completely filled out, you may email it to movwteam@dnr.mo.gov. And this is also the email address you will use if you have any questions about any of the categories. So movwteam@dnr.mo.gov. And depending on the number of applications received, it could take several weeks for us to process the applications for eligibility. And then we will email all of the applicants, letting them know if their project did or did not receive an award. So DERA funding. DERA funding may be used for engine replacement, vehicle and equipment replacement, clean alternative fuel, and more. So projects may be from the following heavy duty diesel emission source types, buses, medium duty or heavy duty trucks, and more. Like I said, go to the website to learn more about the different categories. And also, depending on the projects or depending on the emissions reduction solutions that you are seeking, the maximum award ranges from 25 to 100%. For example, engine replacement ranges from 40 to 60%, depending on the project. Vehicle and equipment replacement ranges from 25 to 50%. Engine upgrades and remanufactured systems max out 40%. DERA projects are selected through lottery from a pool of applications. The department will offer funding for one eligible project associated with each application. And all of the applications are drawn in the lottery. And the remaining unfunded applications will serve as alternates in case the selected awardees decline their awards. So that's DERA funding in a nutshell. So that brings us to the transit and shuttle bus category. The eligibility requirements for the transit and shuttle bus category are as follows. So $1 million would be the maximum amount of funding requests per applicant this round. Eligible vehicles are government and non-government owned buses with engine model years of 2009 and older. And vehicles must be class 4 to 8 with a gross vehicle weight rating greater than 14,000 pounds used for transporting people. Another requirement is that the old engine or vehicle must be permanently disabled. The funding limits for government and non-government owned projects are different. For government owned, the maximum award for repower project is 75% of the actual cost. And replacement project is 50% of the actual cost. For non-government owned projects, the maximum award for repower is 40% of the actual cost, which includes the cost of the new engine and labor. Like I said, the repower for government, the maximum award was 75%, for non-government, 40% of the actual cost. Now for the replacement project for non-government owned the award is 25% of the actual cost to replace an eligible bus with a new or alternative fuel engine. So government was 50%, non-government 25% maximum award. So for repower or replacement project with an all-electric engine is 50% of the actual cost. And the selection process for transit and shuttle buses category is competitive. So which means that the projects will be ranked from lowest to highest price per pound. With the lowest price per pound, projects will be awarded funds. So if the price per pound is over the $50 per pound, will not be considered for funding. So the price per pound represents the amount of money the Volkswagen Trust pays for each pound of nuts reduced by a project. So I guess I went really fast. So that concludes my presentation. Just a reminder, please sign up to receive our Gov delivery to receive program updates. Thank you, and I hope you find some information helpful.
Joy, I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
I do have one question. I'm going to start with you, if I may. The DERA funds and the Volkswagen funds are specifically for diesel replacement. Okay, so if you have to do something with a diesel vehicle to qualify for those funds. So looking at the data for Missouri, I mean, I can see in St. Louis, the Bi-State Developmental Agency for Missouri, Illinois Metropolitan District, they have over 125 diesel shuttles there. So they would be a really good candidate. Just throwing that out there. I'm not sure if they're on the webinar with us or not, but what a great source for that. But if you have gasoline vehicles that you want to retire and replace, or if you just want to do some propane and not have to go through a grant application process, we have a couple of other sources for that too. And I'm gonna pick on David Rigney again from AmeriGas. If we could advance that slide for David. AmeriGas has a program that's quite the incentive. David, tell us about it.
So listening to Perk and all your associates up there, we the last couple of years tried to identify some areas that may help the end user with some of the challenges they may have with the additional costs for, in this case, a propane upgrade to, for alternative fuels. So one of the things that AmeriGas does offer, pending approval, is what we call the AmeriGas Clean Community Grant. And simply that's just if a organization is displacing diesel vehicles, AmeriGas, depending on the length of the contract, the ownership of the equipment, number of vehicles, those types of things, will provide a $5,000 per vehicle AmeriGas Clean Community Grant towards those vehicles. And it depends on qualifications, of course, but I can get into more details about that. But what we're trying to do is to help incentivize those who are, I guess, for a lack of a better term, on the fence. Do I go with alternative fuels? If so, which one? This may help them make a decision to move to propane. But if you do have questions in regards to the AmeriGas Clean Community Grant, we certainly would invite anyone to reach out.
One of the things that you said, David, was for replacing diesel. It's not necessarily diesel, though, is it? I mean, it could be. To qualify for this, you don't have to retire any vehicles. It's just, hey, if you're purchasing, a new propane powered vehicle, this is truly a grant. It's not an application that you have to, like what Joy was mentioned, those are pretty competitive. You're going to be competing with other people for those same funds. This is a straight up, hey, if you're getting this vehicle, you don't have to do anything with any other vehicles, whether they're diesel or gasoline. This is just something we're going to do to help you get over the hump, right?
Correct. And I guess I should have been a little more clear on that, because of we initially started with school buses. And the DEER grant that's out there, we felt this would be, complementary to that. So the difference is, obviously, we don't require you having to drill a hole through the manifold or destroy the diesel, and we don't care if you resell it. So yeah, none of those qualifications are applicable here. It's just if you are partnering with AmeriGas and are purchasing new propane vehicles, then specifically the OEM vehicle. So the Rouse Clean Tech Bluebird bus, or in this case, the transit buses, would be part of that qualifying for the AmeriGas Clean Community Grant. So good point. Thank you, Steve.
And makes total sense. Hey, I'd like to bring in Steve Ahrens now with the Missouri Propane Education and Research Council. There is a funding opportunity that Steve has for folks in the state. That's rather attractive too. Steve, tell us about it.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thanks for putting this presentation together. We've got a couple of programs here in the state of Missouri that we've used for a few years. The rebate program is a few years old, and we have a new one, a zero interest financing program. They're different programs because different entities have different needs. We've offered the $2,000 rebate program for several years. In fact, 4 or 5 years ago, the council put up $1 million over a 10-year period, sort of to match the Volkswagen fund, $2,000 per bus up to 10 buses. We originally opened that up to school districts, but we're opening up now to shuttle buses for paratransit fleets as well. So you got your choice, $2,000 on a vehicle, and it's I'll say it's not a very rigorous process to get this. You call me or you email me and you say, Steve, I think we're going to take possession of 5 propane vehicles in August. And at that point, I set aside the rebate money for you. $10,000 should be set aside for you. And when you take delivery of those vehicles, I show up with 3 things. I'm going to have a camera because I want to take a picture of it. I'm going to have one of these.
Oh, I like that part.
Because it's not an event unless there's a big fake check involved. And the third thing I'm going to have is the real check that we hand off to the school district or the agency, whoever's taking possession of those buses. We don't ask that you do any fuel studies or anything like that. We want to be able to talk to your folks. We want to, be involved down the road. But the application process and the way to get that money is really pretty simple. Just let me know. We will set that aside. So that rebate money is there until you actually take possession of the vehicle. So that's easy peasy on the rebate side. We also have a new program that we've just started. It's a 0% financing incentive. That is through our partner, Central Bank. Central Bank is one of, if not the biggest bank in Missouri, one of the biggest banks. They already have a relationship with many of the school districts in the state and many other entities out there. They already offer to the school districts, and that's why we're with them. They already offer a lease purchase program. If a school district needs to add 200 Chromebooks, for example, you can't maybe add that into the budget and you can't go out and get a loan, but you can lease purchase that over time. We've added propane buses into their program. And the way that works is once you are talking with your central bank representative and you've committed to a bus, we will take the interest payments on that arrangement, and we'll put that in an escrow account. And so that's money certain that'll go toward the lease purchase of that vehicle. For example, if it's a $95,000 school bus and you're going to pay that in 5 annual payments, at that point, I'm going to put about $5,300 into an escrow account for that account. And all you do is make the principal payments. And that would also work with the transit agencies as well. It's just a nice option, whichever one you need to use for your particular circumstance. The financing is a much bigger dollar amount. Like I said, for one bus, our piece of that's about $5,300. On the financing and the rebate, it's $2,000, but it depends if you're using VW money or what you're actually trying to accomplish there. But we're happy to support the adoption of propane vehicles throughout the state. And again, it's easy. Just let me know and we set that money aside. It's just that simple.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like all of our panelists to get their microphones and videos turned on. I have a few questions for you folks, and then and I'd like to leave this slide up because our main point of contact for the participants on this program is going to be the Missouri Propane Education Research Council, Steve Ahrens. So make sure you get this information down, because if you don't get anything else, Steve can direct you to us here in Washington, D.C., or to any of the vehicle solution providers, as well as the infrastructure and fuel providers as well. Oh, look at that beautiful slide. Oh, wow. My goodness. That's you guys are on top of it right there. Okay, going back to Jill, if I may, you said something about dual fuel, and I've heard dual fuel and biofuel being mentioned interchangeably. I think most people end up on the side of biofuel, but what that means is you can actually go between those two fuels, especially out on the island there, where you got to have all your options open.
Right.
But in a biofuel environment there, how much gasoline do you guys end up using with those vehicles? I know you still have some vehicles on gasoline, but in that biofuel arena, what's the proportion? Is it only a little bit of gasoline, or is it a lot, or how much is it actually doing?
Well, I can't tell you that answer yet because I don't have those vehicles yet.
Oh, okay. It was just ordering it. Okay.
Yep, they're
Maybe
ordered.
maybe I can throw that over to Paul, because I
Paul.
think some of the ICOM systems that Paul has are biofuel as well, right, Paul? I don't know if Paul is still with us. I see you.
How about now?
There you go. We
All
got
right.
you.
Yeah, our ICOM systems are a liquid injection biofuel system.
Mhm.
And what that means basically is the engine starts up on gasoline. So that's how the engine starts. And then it immediately converts over to the propane fueling system to operate the vehicle. And so with the range that we can get on our ICOM system, we're operating on propane all day long.
Okay.
We don't have the need to go back to the propane usually on a daily basis. So really we're filling up the tank, let's say on a Monday, that gasoline might be in there for a week or two before we need to put more gasoline in the stock tank. And we just continue to refill the propane on it.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks. One of the things I wanted to bring up with the resiliency, especially in Florida with that hurricane part of it, propane's always been a big part of disaster relief and things like that, with backup generation, with hot showers for first responder. I mean, everything that's set up at the camps. But David Rigney, the bobtails that are actually filling up Paul's locations, and you guys have a priority structure there to make sure he has fuel for these things. But what about when the electricity is out and there's no way to turn these pumps on? Is it possible that a bobtail can actually go to a bulk facility and get more propane without electricity?
Yes, sir. And that's one of the things we work closely with Paul in regards to. If I'm not mistaken, Paul can correct me, but we probably had at least one or two bobtails that we just parked on his property, and were able to pretty much stay around the clock and provide the propane for those vehicles. So again, that's part of that, and you've heard it several times, either through Jill or Paul or myself, about it being mobile, and that truly is the capability of propane is, even if the vehicle is stranded on the side of the road, depending on the state and the regulations of that state, we can schedule to have somebody go out there, get enough fuel into that vehicle by what we call mobile fueling. Imagine that. And gets the customer's vehicle back to the garage without having to get a hook. And that's pretty expensive. So there is a minimal upcharge by doing what we call either mobile or emergency fueling. But that certainly would be very cost effective versus if you had to call a wrecker and have it towed back in. So yes, absolutely.
Terrific. Listen, I know we have run out of time, and I want to respect that for everyone. Listen, thank you so much for being panelists here. To all of our participants, thank you for jumping on, and we trust this has been informative. But as you process all of this and want to move forward, please reach out. We're more than happy to not have you have to go through all of the same things that we did in getting a successful implementation of a very clean, very inexpensive fuel for your fleet. I want to thank you again, and Godspeed to all of you. And if you need anything, reach out to Steve. And again, this is a recording that you'll be able to get from Steve's website as well. So again, thank you and good day.